Beyond the Bell, Bloomberg's comprehensive cross-platform coverage of the U.S. market close starts right now.
And right now, we are 2 minutes away from the end of the trading day. Romaine Bostick and Taylor Riggs here, counting you down to the closing bell, here to help take us beyond the bell. There's a global simulcast with Carol Massar and Katie Greifeld. We welcome our audiences across Bloomberg Television and Radio, as well as on YouTube. A day where we're looking at an S&P 500 down 2% here on the day, a NASDAQ down more than that, and a crypto sphere right now that appears to be in complete disarray. Mike McGlone joining us right now to talk a little bit more about this. Mike, you look at the price action right now with fresh lows on pretty much all of the major tokens here. What gives?
Hi, Romaine. I think the key thing to think about is this is the world's fastest moving asset leading indicator breaking down with contagion implications for all assets. You pointed out maybe this is the potential that'll help flip bonds to a bull market like I heard Jersey was saying. But it's the trickle down. It's the thing that me that's striking is the juxtaposition from when I was at that SALT conference run by Sam Bankman-Fried's firm in Bahamas when he was on the stage with Bill Clinton and former Prime Minister Tony Blair.
Yes.
He was top of the world, and it turns out he might be a fraud. This is a significant shock, but it's the contagion effects. I think it's more macro that's trickling down now.
Well, and how do we look at this as, bigger, broader investors, Mike, in terms of what's happening? Gary Gensler making some comments at an event, and he's concerned about opacity, leverage in the crypto market. No surprise there. Is this just a case of regulators? They've really got to kind of get their act together in terms of oversight of this market.
Oh, yes, and who better than the U.S. to do it properly? Because remember, the key thing about cryptos is they have migrated to the dollar as the base layer. So the key support to watch now is Ethereum around 1,000.
Yeah.
Because I think Bitcoin might even head to 10 to 12,000 as a good support.
Wow.
And we know 20,000 is good resistance.
Yeah.
You got the closing bell.
Sit tight for 1 second here, Mike. Bitcoin down about 13%, Solana down 42%. Closing bells in equity markets in New York with the Dow Jones Industrial Average down 2% on the day, about 647 points. The S&P 500 down 80 points or 2%, while the NASDAQ going to close lower by about 2.5% here on the day. The Russell 2000 moving lower as well, 2.8% here. We should point out that all of these indices right now pretty much around the lows of the day, as sentiment shifting dramatically from what we saw over the previous 3 days.
And I want to get back to Mike McGlone because I'm curious, Mike, about some of the ripple effects within these markets. It's Julianne Emanuel over at Evercore ISI that's saying if you get significant stress in Bitcoin, 13.85, for example, or a trade below 8.3, you do start to feel financial shocks that we think about during a Fed tightening cycle. Again, remind us how sort of idiosyncratic risk this is, or if this is more macro headwinds coming from a Federal Reserve on a quick, fast rate hike cycle.
No, it's all macro. The key thing to remember is, Taylor, this is 1929-ish. The world is tilting towards recession, and central banks, including the Fed, most notably the Fed, are increasing their restraints. So this is just part of that trickle down. Now, I think it's towards the end of the year. Remember, this is the time of year people have to make those final decisions. They've been buying dips all year. It's not working, so they're hitting stops. Crude oil was the first ones that followed Bitcoin yesterday. Crude oil still has a lot of room to drop because it's still too expensive. Stock market's already corrected a lot, and Bitcoin is that leading indicator. So it's the question of where it stops, but I think this leads us to the year end, which is this bear market's not going to go out as a lamb.
I do just want to point out, too.
Great reversion.
I do just want to point out, too, here, as with the closing bells here on equities, all of those crypto stocks meaningful lower on the day. Riot Blockchain down about 8%. MicroStrategy down 19% on the day, and Coinbase down about 10%.
And Mike, I want to focus in on the crypto sphere itself. When you think about contagion to the other asset classes, maybe it's a tough bridge to build. But when you think about what is going on with the coin themselves, everything, if you look at crypto on the terminal, is red, obviously. But Solana catches my eye. That token is down 43%, Mike. Of course, yeah. SBF had been a big supporter of that blockchain, of that token. How bad could things get?
It can get very bad. I'm looking at the key support you need to look for in Bitcoin is around $10,000 to $12,000. And that's been my biggest problem all along. There is over 20,000 of these speculative trading crypto assets, and maybe 100 of them are legitimate. And to me, that's what we're taking out. We're flushing out those excesses. But the key thing to think about here, in the past, when we had markets really drop, cryptos are leading, the Fed would come in and ease. This is not happening. So, and crypto's taking it out. Yes, they got plenty to go lower. And it's going to be a long time, I think, before we reach a plateau that really settles things down.
All right. Yeah. I mean, looking right now, I mean, you have Bitcoin, at least based on Bloomberg pricing, now testing that 16,000 level. A break below that certainly could have some ramifications here. And this, of course, on a day where we saw a lot of the big cap tech names in the equity space also move lower, with Apple down 3%, Tesla down about 7%, Disney falling about 13%. Mike, when it comes to the crypto sphere here, we've spoken with several people here, including the CEO of Lale. We spoke with the CFTC commissioner a little bit earlier as well as a few other folks. And they all seem to be pointing to this idea that maybe what's ailing FTX and Binance doesn't necessarily need to be sort of that nail in the coffin for the crypto space writ large. The idea that there's still some sort of stability in Bitcoin itself, the idea that there is still some sort of underlying technology here that people will remain invested in.
Well, I completely agree with that, Romaine. There's one thing to remember about Ethereum. It's making possible the most widely traded cryptos on the planet are crypto dollars. The base layer is the dollar. That the U.S. is not going to mess that up. But this thing with Sam Bankman, I met him in the Bahamas, and I'm just shocked that he turned out to be just a giant fraud. And the FTX exchange, that's what it's going through.
Right.
We'll get through that. But this is the bottom line. The technology is legit. There's so much talent in there. It just remember we saw what happened in internet stocks from 2000 2002. We're seeing in cryptos now, and it's going to get worse.
All right, Mike McGlone there of Bloomberg Intelligence for us. And we should point out, of course, we have not yet heard from Sam Bankman-Fried himself yet on the latest developments. And, of course, still an investigation going on as to exactly what happened there, whether it was fraud or maybe something else. Guys, come back into this conversation here. I'm not even sure where to start here on a day where we have a midterm election. We've got a big CPI report tomorrow. And then, of course, all this crypto volatility in between.
I guess what we have to say is, like, this is certainly, even though cryptocurrencies and the crypto world has been around for, 10 years or so and counting, it's still a new world. Anytime you talk to somebody who is very involved and entrenched in this, says we're very early innings on the crypto space. You know, we talked with the Coinbase CEO came on Bloomberg Television and said, we're not investing customer friends. We're not doing market making or engaging in any kind of complex arrangement with other parties that we own, basically saying, we don't have the problems. I guess at this point, we're kind of seeing some of, I don't know whether you call it some of the more risky plays. I guess we have to be careful because we have to find out more information about what exactly this company was doing to understand where were the weak points in this. And this is where regulators, I think many would argue, have been, behind in this process.
And your point to regulators, I mean, we've been talking about this idea of this sort of the lack of transparency here, which is making it hard to know what's going on. And just to go back, and just to be clear that we clarify here with regards to Sam Bankman-Fried himself, as well as his properties, whether it's FTX or Alameda, we do not know if this is fraud. There are obviously a lot of allegations out there, but we do have to wait for this investigation. And of course, we invite Sam Bankman-Fried himself and anyone else from his organization to speak to us. But we should point out a lot we don't know, and there's going to be probably some time before we get a definitive answer as to what exactly happened.
It's a rapidly evolving story. Investigations are underway. It's important to remember that. There are more questions than answers. Let's bring in Hannah Miller. She is Bloomberg News crypto reporter. We're going to ask her some of the hard questions. Hannah, what I want to know is what could possibly happen to FTX here, because we heard from Sam Bankman-Fried on Twitter yesterday that the reason that they were looking at this deal with Binance was to relieve some of those liquidity issues. If Binance isn't going to come in here, what theoretically happens to all of these massive withdrawals?
Yes, so there is a lot at play here, but bankruptcy for FTX is a possibility. There's also the potential for legal action. We know in Binance's statement and them walking away from the deal that they brought up concerns that there was illegal things happening here. So it's really hard to say. Brian Armstrong said yesterday that customers could lose funds if this deal does not go through. That seems like a likelihood.
Hannah, this is where we have to figure out contagion. We all do as a news organization, or can we just kind of, section it off in terms of FTX specifically? How are you guys going about it? How are you thinking about it?
Yeah, so Sam Bankman-Fried and FTX have a far reach within the crypto industry, so this is a complex situation. We are looking at multiple angles, including the various deals and bailouts that Sam Bankman-Fried had in play. We are looking at the companies that have connections to them. We are looking at Alameda Research, which is the crypto trading firm that Bankman-Fried also co-founded. So there's really a lot to examine here, and it's going to be a complex story that is going to unfold in incredible ways, I think.
Hannah, when you're thinking about some of the ripple effects, the contagion, it's interesting. James Seifert over at Bloomberg Intelligence wrote in and said, we're not seeing it yet on the terminal. It'll update soon. But the Grayscale Bitcoin Trust just closed at a 40% discount to the NAV. And I'm sort of curious how you think about liquidity in this market and sort of the ripple effects as well.
Yeah, there's definitely, I think, a risk for contagion here. We do see players disclosing exposure. Genesis was another one. And it's really hard to say, what's going to happen here. Regarding liquidity, it's been interesting having conversations with people about, what FTT means for liquidity. That's the native token to FTX, and part of what drove the situation. So it's definitely a complex scenario.
All right, in conversation right now with Hannah Miller over at Bloomberg News as we keep an eye on what's going on in the crypto space. Bitcoin still on the back foot, down about 14%. Solana now down almost 46% here. We should point out that we are still keeping our eye here on the outcomes of the U.S. midterm elections, and we are expected to hear comments from the President of the United States, Joe Biden, there at the White House. Not quite clear exactly what he's going to say, but we do know that he is going to address the outcome of those elections. We will bring you his comments as soon as we're sure that he's getting to them. And when we look here, and Katie, I actually am curious about your thoughts here, going back here to the crypto space and Bitcoin, about the potential contagion risk that I think a lot of people are looking at. Look, we know the crypto space is a much smaller market, a few $1 billion in market value overall versus an equity market that alone is something like, $24-25 trillion here. So contagion is, I guess, a much different thing in that space versus maybe what we saw when we saw the housing market collapse or the Lehman Brothers collapse.
Exactly. I mean, in some ways, perhaps it's a blessing that we have had this tremendous drawdown. You think about the crypto market being worth $3 trillion a few months ago, and now under $1 trillion or close to it. So a lot of that money has been already flushed out, people who would have been hurt right now. But again, you go back to the issue of FTX having a liquidity crunch, facing these massive withdrawals. If you think about who is involved with that platform, it's a lot of retail, and there's a lot of pain potentially to come.
We are also getting a lot of earnings, you guys. I know as we're digesting a lot of this crypto news, Bumble, of course, is one that we're following here. And I'm just going to pull it up. They're looking at, as you can see here, fourth quarter revenue that also is coming in light, $232 million to $237 million. Expectations had been for almost $254 million as well. So you're seeing, again, forward guidance that comes in really, really light. Romaine, particularly the third quarter numbers that we also got that looked light as well. 233 estimates had been for 237.9 for the third quarter top line numbers too.
We came into this morning with actually an interesting headline out of Redfin that they were cutting 13% of their staff and shutting down that home flipping business. The company now coming out with earnings here after the bell with a third quarter loss of about 83 cents a share. That's bigger than what the street was looking for, and revenue of about $600 million, which is roughly in line with what the street was looking for. The share is down here in after hours trading, and it might have something to do with the guidance. 4Q net loss 118 to 134. That's the guidance that they're giving. That would be much bigger loss than what the street was looking for on average, Carol, of $65 million.
Well, we've heard it from Open Door. We've heard it from Zillow. We've heard it from Compass, right? When it comes to the housing market, we have seen an incredible retrenchment, and it is affecting and really impacting, all of these folks within this sector. And keep in mind, right, as you said, Romaine, we came into this report from Redfin with already news about them doing some layoffs. So again, and shutting this business, no surprise, but again, getting pretty rough, guys.
And again, just looking at some of the post-market action in those names, Redfin shares down 3%. You look at Bumble, just an absolute wipeout, down almost 19%. There is no margin for error in this environment. Yeah,
you're seeing Unity Software down, AppLovin down on the back of earnings. Rivian earnings actually coming out as well. Their 3Q revenue, Taylor, coming in at $536 million. That's below the street estimate of $561 on a consensus basis. The adjusted loss per share, $157, which is better than consensus.
Still trying to look at full year production of 25,000 25,000 vehicles, but the estimate was over 26,000. And they're really highlighting number R1 backlog of over 114,000. Carol, as you really think about this company and the path forward to profitability.
All right, so Rivian's higher, so too is Beyond Meat, up about 2.5% here in the after hours. Third quarter adjusted EBITDA loss, $73.8 million. That's bigger than the estimated loss of $58.1 million, but they are targeting cash flow positive within the second half of 2023. So maybe that's why there's some optimism, but nonetheless, a busy Wednesday, guys, and a lot of earnings news. What?
Yeah, I wrapping.
I got to go. We got to go. We got lots more to go. All right, guys, that's it for our cross-platform coverage. Radio, TV, YouTube, and Bloomberg Quick Take. We will see you same time, same place tomorrow.